The transport ship docked at Velcor Station with a metallic groan that echoed through the arrival bay. Passengers began filing out, a mix of species from across the galaxy. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some had scales. Some had fur. And a few seemed to be made of pure energy contained in environmental suits. Among them walked Professor Taman, a member of the Calvex species. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his crystalline skin catching the station's artificial light and refracting it into subtle rainbows. His face was angular and sharp, with eyes that held no warmth. Behind him, secured by 3 separate chain leads, came something that made every other passenger scramble away in fear. The creature was massive. It stood 6 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in obsidian black scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 6 eyes glowed a deep crimson across its broad skull. When it breathed, steam rose from its nostrils. Rows of serrated teeth were visible even though its mouth was clamped shut by a heavy muzzle. This was Cora, a Vrexian Terror-Hound, and she was possibly the most dangerous creature on the entire station. Terror-Hounds came from Brexia Prime, a death world where nearly everything evolved to kill. They were apex predators, telepathically sensitive to fear and aggression. Most species considered them impossible to control. Yet here was Professor Taman, leading one through a public space like it was nothing more than an oversized pet. The professor pulled sharply on the chains when Cora's pace slowed. A collar around her thick neck buzzed with blue energy. The Terror-Hound flinched and increased her speed, a low growl rumbling from her chest. The sound made several nearby aliens press themselves against the walls. Station security met them at the checkpoint. The head guard, a 4-armed Pelion, kept his weapons ready as he scanned their credentials. His eyes never left Cora. "Professor Taman," the guard said, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into Galactic Common. "Your quarters are in Research Wing 7. Your specimen has been assigned to secure Holding Bay 3. The containment unit is rated for Class 5 dangerous creatures." "Adequate," Professor Taman replied, his voice cold and precise. "Have my research materials been delivered?" "Yes, Professor. Everything is waiting in your laboratory, but I must stress the station's safety protocols regarding your Terror-Hound. Any aggressive incidents will result in immediate termination of the specimen." The professor's crystalline face remained expressionless. "Cora is completely under my control. There will be no incidents." As if to contradict him, Cora pulled against her chains, her 6 eyes focusing on something across the arrival bay. Her growl deepened, becoming a sound that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Several travelers dropped their belongings and ran. Professor Taman pressed a button on a remote device. Cora's collar buzzed again, more intensely this time. The Terror-Hound yelped, a sharp sound of pain, and immediately dropped low to the ground, trembling. The professor's expression didn't change. "As I said," he repeated. "Complete control." The guard didn't look convinced, but he waved them through. Professor Taman led Cora toward the holding bays, the Terror-Hound's claws scraping against the metal floor with each reluctant step. Elsewhere on the station, Jiwoo was unpacking her belongings in her new quarters. She was human, which still drew curious looks from many species. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only made first contact 23 years ago. They were considered unusual in many ways. They came from a world that was surprisingly dangerous by galactic standards, yet they weren't particularly strong or fast compared to other species. What made them strange was their behavior. Humans bonded with things. They made friends with creatures that would terrify other species. They showed emotions openly and seemed to have an endless capacity for empathy. The galaxy wasn't quite sure what to make of them yet. Jiwoo had graduated top of her class in xenozoology. She specialized in animal behavior and had written her thesis on misunderstood predator species. When the position at Velcor Station opened up, she jumped at the chance. This was one of the most prestigious research facilities in known space, hosting scientists from dozens of worlds. Her comm device chimed. She picked it up and saw a message from Station Commander Haiyan, another human who had been working on Velcor for 5 years. "Welcome to the station, Jiwoo. Your assignment has been finalized. You'll be working as a research assistant to Professor Taman. He's a xenobiologist from Calvex Prime, very respected in his field. Report to Research Wing 7, Laboratory 4 at 0800 station time tomorrow. Also be advised that the professor works with a Vrexian Terror-Hound. Familiarize yourself with the safety protocols." Jiwoo's eyebrows rose. A Terror-Hound? She immediately pulled up her data pad and started researching. What she read made her frown. Terror-Hounds were classified as Category 5 dangerous creatures. They were described as ruthless predators, impossible to domesticate, driven purely by hunting instinct. Every report emphasized their aggression and unpredictability. But something bothered her about the reports. They all focused on incidents involving Terror-Hounds that had been captured or cornered. There was almost no data on their behavior in natural habitats. The few field studies that existed were brief and conducted from a safe distance. Nobody seemed to have actually studied how these creatures lived in the wild. She made a note to ask Professor Taman about his research methods. If he had successfully trained a Terror-Hound, he must have discovered something about their behavior that the official reports were missing. The next morning, Jiwoo arrived at Laboratory 4 exactly on time. The door slid open to reveal a large workspace filled with equipment she recognized and some she didn't. Specimen tanks lined one wall, containing various creatures suspended in stasis. Holographic displays showed rotating anatomical models of different alien life forms. Professor Taman stood at the central workstation, reviewing data on a screen. He didn't turn when she entered. "You are the human assistant," he said. It wasn't a question. "Jiwoo, according to my files. You should know that I do not adjust my standards for any species. You will follow my protocols exactly, or you will be removed from this project." "Understood, Professor," Jiwoo replied politely. "I'm looking forward to learning from your work." "Then your first lesson begins now. Follow me." The professor led her through a side door into a corridor that ended at a heavy reinforced barrier. A sign warned that dangerous specimens were housed beyond this point. Security scanners verified their identities before the barrier slowly lifted. The holding area beyond was dimly lit and cold. The walls were thick metal, designed to contain creatures that could tear through lesser materials. Several cages lined the space, most of them empty. But in the largest cage at the far end, something moved in the shadows. Cora emerged into the light as they approached. She was even more intimidating up close. Her 6 eyes tracked their movement with predatory precision. The muzzle on her face was connected to her collar with reinforced cables. Her massive body was covered in old scars beneath the scales. When those 6 red eyes fixed on Jiwoo, Cora's whole body tensed. The growl that came from her throat was deep enough to feel in the chest. She lunged forward, chains snapping tight, stopping her just inches from the cage bars. Her claws scraped against the metal floor. Saliva dripped from around her muzzle. Professor Taman pressed his remote. Cora's collar buzzed and she jerked back, whimpering. "This is Cora," the professor said calmly, as if nothing had happened. "She is my primary research subject. A perfect example of a tamed apex predator. I have spent 3 years conditioning her responses. She appears aggressive, but she is completely under control." Jiwoo barely heard him. She was watching Cora carefully, and what she saw didn't match what the professor was saying. Yes, Cora had lunged at her. But as Jiwoo looked closer, she noticed details others might miss. The Terror-Hound's ears were pinned flat against her skull. Her haunches were low, legs bent, ready to retreat. Her 6 eyes kept darting between Jiwoo and Professor Taman, never focusing fully on the human. This wasn't a predator preparing to attack. This was a frightened animal trying to defend itself. Jiwoo's heart sank as she realized the truth. Cora wasn't tamed at all. She was terrified. Part 2. The days fell into a pattern that made Jiwoo increasingly uncomfortable. Each morning, she would arrive at the laboratory and assist Professor Taman with his various research projects. The work itself was interesting enough. They studied different alien species, documenting their biology and behavior. The professor was brilliant, there was no question about that. His knowledge was vast and his methods were precise. But when it came to Cora, everything felt wrong. The Terror-Hound was kept in a cage that barely allowed her to turn around. She could stand and lie down, but that was all. The space was cold and bare, just metal walls and a metal floor. Food arrived twice a day through an automated slot, always the same nutrient paste. It provided everything she needed to survive, but nothing more. Professor Taman visited Cora 3 times per day for what he called training sessions. Jiwoo was required to observe and take notes. The training consisted of the professor giving commands and using the shock collar when Cora didn't obey quickly enough. Sit, stay, move to the back of the cage, present for examination. Each command was followed by punishment if the response wasn't immediate. Cora obeyed, but her 6 eyes held a look that Jiwoo recognized. It was the same look she had seen in abused animals back on Earth. It was fear, pure and simple, mixed with resignation. The key to controlling apex predators, Professor Taman explained during one session, is establishing clear dominance. They must understand that resistance brings pain. Obedience brings the absence of pain. This is the only language such creatures understand. Jiwoo bit her tongue and continued taking notes. She was new here, a junior researcher working under a famous professor. Questioning his methods would likely just get her removed from the project. But every time she heard Cora yelp from another shock, something inside her twisted. The other researchers on the station seemed to accept the situation. When Jiwoo carefully brought up the subject with a colleague, a friendly Pelion named Davin, he just shrugged his forearms. Terror-Hounds are dangerous, Davin said simply. Professor Taman's methods might seem harsh, but he has successfully controlled a creature that most experts say cannot be controlled. The results speak for themselves, but she's not really controlled, Jiwoo argued gently. She's just afraid. That's not the same thing. Davin tilted his head, his translator device clicking as he processed her words. I do not understand the difference. Fear creates compliance. That is control. Jiwoo realized that many species viewed things differently than humans did. For them, the use of fear and punishment was simply logical. They didn't see it as cruel. It was just efficient. Trying to explain why it bothered her felt like trying to describe color to someone who had never seen. But she couldn't let it go. Jiwoo started spending her free time in the station's library, researching everything she could find about Terror-Hounds. The official records all painted the same picture: aggressive, untamable, driven by predatory instinct. But the more she read, the more gaps she noticed in the research. Most of the data came from Terror-Hounds in captivity, or Terror-Hounds that had been cornered by hunters. There was almost nothing about their natural behavior. The few field observations that existed were conducted from ships hovering high above Rexia Prime, watching through long-range scanners. Then she found something interesting. It was an old survey report filed away in the archives. A team of xenobiologists had landed on Rexia Prime 40 years ago to conduct a brief study. They had observed a pack of Terror-Hounds from a safe distance. The report was only 3 pages long and mostly focused on the planet's dangerous environment. But there was one paragraph that caught her attention. Observed pack behavior suggests complex social structure. Juveniles were seen engaging in play behavior under supervision of adult specimens. Pack members appeared to communicate through combination of vocalizations and telepathic signals. When one adult was injured during a hunt, other pack members brought food to it and remained nearby during recovery. Further study recommended pack behavior, social structure, care for injured members. These weren't the characteristics of mindless killing machines. These were the characteristics of intelligent social creatures. Jiwoo saved the report to her datapad and kept searching. She found a few more fragments of information, scattered across decades of research. Each piece suggested the same thing. Terror-Hounds were far more complex than the galaxy believed. She formed a theory. The Terror-Hounds' telepathic sensitivity to fear and aggression wasn't just for hunting. It was for pack communication. They needed to sense each other's emotional states to coordinate and bond. When humans domesticated wolves back on Earth, they had succeeded because wolves were already social pack animals. The bond between human and dog was built on that existing pack instinct. What if Terror-Hounds were the same? What if the reason everyone thought they were untamable was because everyone approached them with fear and aggression, the exact emotions that would trigger a defensive response? It was just a theory. But Jiwoo decided to test it. She started simply. After her work shift ended, she would stop by Cora's holding area. She would sit on the floor outside the cage, far enough away to be non-threatening and just be present. She brought a book or her datapad and read quietly. At first, Cora's response was immediate and hostile. The Terror-Hound would growl continuously, a deep rumbling sound that made the cage vibrate. Her 6 eyes would track every movement Jiwoo made. The message was clear. Stay away. But Jiwoo didn't leave. She also didn't push. She simply sat there, calm and relaxed, making no demands. She kept her body language open and non-threatening. She didn't make direct eye contact, which many predators viewed as a challenge. She just existed in the same space. After a week, something changed. Cora still growled when Jiwoo arrived, but the intensity was less. The Terror-Hound would watch her for a few minutes, then eventually settle down, though her eyes never fully closed. Jiwoo started bringing her meals to the holding area. She would eat her food while sitting outside Cora's cage, narrating what she was doing in a soft, friendly voice. "This is called kimchi," Jiwoo would say, holding up a container. "It's fermented vegetables from my home planet. Pretty spicy. My grandmother taught me how to make it. She said the key is patience. Good things take time." Cora would watch with what seemed like curiosity. Her 6 eyes would focus on the food, her nostrils flaring to catch the scent. But she never lunged or showed aggression during these times. She just watched. Other researchers noticed Jiwoo's routine and thought she was crazy. The security guards started keeping a closer eye on the holding area, convinced that one day they would find the human researcher torn apart. But days passed, then 2 weeks, and Jiwoo remained completely unharmed. Professor Taimin noticed too. He confronted Jiwoo one morning in the laboratory, his crystalline face harder than usual. "I am told you have been spending time near my specimen," he said coldly. "This is inappropriate. You are interfering with her conditioning." "I'm just observing, Professor," Jiwoo replied carefully. "Part of being a good researcher is learning to observe subjects in different contexts. Cora is a Terror-Hound, not a subject for casual observation. Your human sentimentality is dangerous. These creatures respond only to strength and dominance. By showing them anything else, you invite attack. With respect, Professor, I'm not showing weakness. I'm showing calm confidence. There's a difference." The professor's eyes narrowed. "You presume to know better than established xenobiological practice? You have been in this field for how long? And you think you understand apex predators better than researchers who have studied them for decades?" Jiwoo took a breath. She needed to be diplomatic. "I'm not claiming to know better, Professor. I'm just exploring different approaches. Scientific inquiry requires testing different hypotheses. Your hypothesis will get you killed. Terror-Hounds sense fear and aggression telepathically, but they also sense other emotions. Affection, trust, friendship, these things a predator interprets as vulnerability, as an invitation to attack. I am ordering you to cease this dangerous behavior. Professor, that is final. You will not approach Cora's holding area outside of official research sessions. If you disobey, I will have you removed from this project and file a formal complaint about your conduct." Jiwoo wanted to argue, but she could see it would be useless. The professor had made up his mind. She nodded slowly. "I understand, Professor," but she didn't stop. She just became more careful about when she visited. Late at night, when the station was quiet and most researchers were sleeping, Jiwoo would slip down to the holding area. The security systems logged her presence, but she had clearance to be there. She wasn't breaking any rules technically, and slowly, gradually, something remarkable began to happen. When Jiwoo arrived, Cora would move to the side of the cage closest to her. The growling stopped entirely. The Terror-Hound's body language shifted from defensive to curious. Her 6 eyes would watch Jiwoo with what looked like anticipation. One night, Jiwoo noticed that Cora's posture had completely changed. The Terror-Hound was sitting calmly, her tail wrapped around her body. When Jiwoo sat down, Cora made a sound that wasn't a growl. It was softer, almost questioning. Part 3, the breakthrough came during a power outage. Velcor Station was massive and complex, with systems layered upon systems to keep thousands of inhabitants alive in the vacuum of space. But even the best engineering sometimes failed. A cooling malfunction in one of the primary power generators caused an automatic shutdown to prevent damage. Backup systems kicked in immediately, but there was a gap, a brief window where the station went dark. Jiwoo had been sitting outside Cora's cage as usual, reading by the light of her datapad. When the power cut out, everything went black. The ever-present hum of life support systems fell silent. For a few seconds, the station held its breath. In the darkness, Jiwoo heard Cora's breathing change. It became faster, shallower. The Terror-Hound was afraid. Of course she was. Darkness meant vulnerability, and after years of punishment and pain, Cora had learned that vulnerability meant suffering. Jiwoo stayed very still. She kept her own breathing calm and even. Then, without really thinking about it, she started to hum. It was an old lullaby, something her grandmother used to sing when Jiwoo was small and afraid of the dark. The melody was simple and soothing, a gentle rhythm that spoke of safety and comfort. She hummed softly, barely above a whisper, just putting the sound out into the darkness. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to control or manipulate. She was just offering a small piece of comfort to another frightened creature. The backup lights flickered on, dim red emergency lighting that cast everything in shadow. Jiwoo's eyes adjusted slowly. When she could see again, she found Cora pressed against the cage bars closest to her. The Terror-Hound had moved silently across her cage and now sat just a few feet away, separated only by the reinforced metal. Cora's 6 eyes were wide, all focused on Jiwoo, but there was no aggression in her posture. Her ears weren't pinned back. Her body wasn't tense. She looked almost peaceful. The moment stretched between them, human and Terror-Hound connected by nothing but a simple melody and the understanding of shared fear. Then the main power restored with a sudden flood of light, and Cora quickly backed away to the far corner of her cage, as if embarrassed to have been caught being vulnerable. But Jiwoo had seen it. The wall was cracking. The next day, Station Commander Hyeon called Jiwoo to her office. Commander Hyeon was in her 50s, a practical woman who had worked her way up through the ranks of human space exploration. Her office reflected her personality, efficient, organized and decorated with just a few personal touches, including a photograph of Earth's moon. "Sit down, Jiwoo," the commander said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk about Professor Taemin's Terror-Hound." Jiwoo's heart sank. "I haven't broken any rules, Commander. I have clearance to—" "Relax, you're not in trouble." Commander Hyeon pulled up a holographic display showing security footage from the holding area. "I've been watching your progress with interest. The security team sends me reports on anything unusual, and a human befriending a Terror-Hound definitely qualifies as unusual." The footage showed Jiwoo sitting outside Cora's cage night after night. It showed Cora's gradual change in behavior, from constant aggression to calm acceptance. "I've also received a formal complaint from Professor Taemin," the commander continued. "He believes you're interfering with his research and putting yourself in danger. He wants you removed from the project." "Commander, I can explain." Hyun held up a hand. I said, "Relax. I'm not removing you. In fact, I'm authorizing you to continue your work. I forwarded your observation notes to our xenopsychology team. They find your theories about Terror-Hound social behavior compelling. Dr. Rena, who heads the department, thinks you might be onto something significant." Jiwoo felt relief wash over her. "Thank you, Commander. I really believe that the galactic community has misunderstood these creatures." "That's a bold claim. Terror-Hounds have been studied for over a century. You're essentially saying that every xenobiologist who has worked with them has gotten it wrong." "Not wrong exactly, just incomplete. Most research has been conducted on captured specimens or in hostile encounters. Nobody has tried to understand them on their own terms." Commander Hyeon leaned back in her chair, studying Jiwoo carefully. "You know why I'm supporting this? It's not just because you're a fellow human, though I admit that helps. It's because I've seen this pattern before. Humans have a gift for seeing past surface behavior to underlying causes. We do it with each other, and apparently we can do it with alien species too." "We're good at empathy," Jiwoo agreed. "Sometimes to our detriment. But sometimes it gives us insights others miss. Here's what I'm going to do. Professor Taemin has requested leave to attend a conference on his homeworld. It's a 3-day trip. During that time, you'll have supervised access to Cora. Full access, including control over her restraints and environmental systems. Use that time wisely," Jiwoo's eyes widened. "Full access? Commander, that's incredibly generous but also risky. If something goes wrong, it's on me. I'm taking responsibility for this decision, but I don't think anything will go wrong. I've seen the footage. That Terror-Hound doesn't want to hurt you. She wants to trust you. Give her a reason to." Professor Taemin departed for his conference the following morning. He left strict instructions about Cora's care and feeding schedule. He reminded the station staff multiple times that the Terror-Hound was dangerous and should never be trusted. Then his ship left the docking bay, and Jiwoo finally had her chance. She went to the holding area with Commander Hyeon and 2 security officers. The commander had insisted on safety precautions, which Jiwoo appreciated. This was uncharted territory. No matter how much progress she had made, Cora was still a powerful predator capable of killing with one bite. Cora was lying in her cage when they arrived. Her massive body curled as much as the small space allowed. When she saw Jiwoo, her 6 eyes brightened. When she saw the security officers with their weapons ready, she tensed. "It's okay," Jiwoo said softly, approaching slowly. "They're just here to watch. They won't hurt you." She turned to Commander Hyan. "I need to remove her collar first. The neural suppression device. It causes her constant discomfort and pain. She associates pain with human presence. I need her to feel relief when she's around me." "That collar is the primary safety measure," one of the security officers objected. "Without it, we have no way to stop her if she attacks." "You have your weapons," Jiwoo pointed out. "And I have 3 years of studying animal behavior. Trust me. This is necessary." Commander Hyan considered for a moment, then nodded. "Do it, but slowly." Jiwoo accessed the control panel that managed Korra's restraints. Her hands were shaking slightly as she navigated the system. This was a huge risk. Everything she believed about Terror-Hounds was based on theory and observation. If she was wrong, if Korra really was just a mindless predator, this could end very badly. She found the collar controls. There was a warning message that required 3 separate confirmations to override. She provided them all. The collar around Korra's neck hummed once, then went silent. The blue energy that had been constantly buzzing against the Terror-Hound scales faded away. For a moment, nothing happened. Korra remained motionless, as if unsure whether to believe the pain had really stopped. Then slowly, she stood up. She stretched her neck, rolling her massive head from side to side. A sound came from her throat, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. It was a sound of pure relief. The security officers tensed, weapons rising. But Korra didn't attack. She didn't even approach the cage bars. She just stood there, experiencing the absence of pain for the first time in years. "Hey, Korra," Jiwoo said gently. "Feel better?" The Terror-Hound's 6 eyes focused on her. Jiwoo could feel the weight of that gaze, the intelligence behind it. Korra was telepathically sensitive. She could read emotions. Right now, she was reading Jiwoo, sensing what the human felt. Jiwoo let her feel it all. The genuine care, the desire to help, the absence of fear or aggression, the simple wish to offer comfort to a creature that had suffered too long. Korra took a step toward the front of the cage. Then another. The security officers' grips tightened on their weapons. But Commander Hyan raised a hand, signaling them to hold. When Korra reached the cage bars, she lowered her massive head and pressed it against the metal. It was a gesture of trust, of vulnerability. She was putting herself in a position where she couldn't easily defend herself. Jiwoo's heart was pounding. This was the moment. Either her theory was right, or she was about to lose a hand. There was a small feeding slot in the cage, designed for safely passing food through without opening the main door. It was just barely large enough for Jiwoo to fit her arm through. "I'm going to touch you now," Jiwoo said quietly. "Is that okay?" Korra didn't move away. If anything, she pressed closer to the bars. Jiwoo took a deep breath and slid her arm through the feeding slot. Her hand emerged on the other side, inside the cage, within easy reach of Korra's teeth. She moved slowly, telegraphing her intentions clearly. Then gently, carefully, she reached up and scratched behind one of Korra's ears. The Terror-Hound's 6 eyes closed. All of them simultaneously. The sound that came from her throat was definitely a purr, a deep rumbling that vibrated through the floor. It was the sound of a creature. Part 4. Professor Taemin returned from his conference 3 days later to find his carefully constructed world falling apart. The security footage was waiting for him in his office. Commander Hyan had made sure of that. The professor watched in silence as the recordings showed Jiwoo removing Korra's neural collar. He watched as the human put her arm through the feeding slot. He watched as the Terror-Hound, his supposedly tamed predator, responded with affection instead of aggression. His crystalline hands clenched into fists. The rainbow light refracting through his skin turned harsh and sharp. He found Jiwoo in the laboratory cataloging samples from another project. She looked up as he entered and immediately recognized the fury in his bearing. "Professor Taemin, welcome back. What have you done?" His voice was cold enough to freeze water. "You interfered with my research. You undermined years of my work. You put yourself and this entire station at risk. With respect, Professor, I did none of those things. I conducted my own research with proper authorization from Station Command. And I proved that you proved nothing." The professor's voice rose, which was unusual for a Calvex. They prided themselves on emotional control. "You got lucky. Terror-Hounds are unpredictable. The fact that Cora did not attack you once does not mean she will not attack you tomorrow, or the next day. You are playing with forces you do not understand. I understand that she's a social creature who responds to kindness. I understand that fear-based training has been making her more dangerous, not less. Professor, your methods are causing harm. The professor's eyes narrowed dangerously. You presume to lecture me on xenobiology? A human who has been in space for barely a generation? My species has been studying alien life for 3,000 years. We have established protocols based on vast experience. And you think your feelings are more important than proven science? Science is supposed to adapt when new evidence appears, Jiwoo said, trying to keep her voice calm. The evidence shows that Terror-Hounds are not what we thought they were. They're pack animals. They need social bonds. Enough! Professor Tamen's hand slammed down on the laboratory table. Several instruments rattled. I am filing a formal complaint with the Interspecies Academic Council. You will be removed from the station. Your methods are dangerous, your conclusions are baseless, and your human sentimentality has no place in serious research. He turned and left before Jiwoo could respond. She stood alone in the laboratory, her hands shaking. She had known this confrontation was coming, but the intensity of it still shocked her. The complaint Professor Taman filed went beyond just Jiwoo. It became a larger argument about human integration into galactic science. He argued that humans were too emotional, too willing to anthropomorphize alien creatures, too quick to trust their feelings over established data. He had support too. Many species shared his concerns about humans. The complaint reached the station's administrative council within hours. This was the group that handled major disputes and policy decisions. It consisted of representatives from 7 different species, including Commander Hyon representing humanity. The meeting was held in the station's main conference hall. Professor Taman presented his case with cold precision. He showed Jiwoo's observation logs and dismissed them as anecdotal. He showed the security footage and claimed it proved nothing except luck. He argued that allowing such reckless behavior set a dangerous precedent. Terror-Hounds are Category 5 dangerous creatures, he stated, his voice carrying through the hall. The classification system exists for a reason. It is based on centuries of documented incidents. This human researcher, through a combination of ignorance and emotional thinking, has convinced herself that she can overturn established science through wishful thinking. Several council members nodded in agreement. The representative from the Pelian species, a dignified elder named Vex, spoke up. Professor Taman raises valid concerns. While we appreciate human contributions to our community, we must also recognize that humans are relatively new to interstellar science. Perhaps more supervision is required. But Commander Hyon was prepared. With respect to Professor Taman's expertise, I would like to present alternative evidence. Dr. Rena, our head of xenopsychology, has reviewed researcher Jiwoo's findings. Dr. Rena, would you please share your analysis? Dr. Rena was a member of the Torvan species, beings who looked like walking trees with multiple eyes distributed across their trunk-like bodies. She had been studying at Velcor Station for 20 years and was highly respected. Thank you, Commander. Dr. Rena's translator device converted her rustling leaves into words. I have examined researcher Jiwoo's methodology and conclusions. While unconventional, her approach is scientifically sound. She identified gaps in existing Terror-Hound research and tested a hypothesis through careful observation. Her results are significant. Results? Professor Taman challenged. She pet the creature once. That is hardly significant. She achieved behavioral changes that you did not achieve in 3 years. Dr. Rena countered gently. More importantly, she identified a fundamental error in how we have classified Terror-Hounds. We labeled them as solitary predators based on limited data. Her research suggests they are pack animals whose behavior has been misinterpreted due to the stress of captivity and hostile interactions. The council members murmured among themselves. This was more serious than a simple dispute between researchers. If Dr. Rena was right, it meant the galactic community had been wrong about an entire species for over a century. Professor Taman's crystalline skin flushed darker. This is ridiculous. You are allowing human emotionalism to cloud scientific judgment. I demand that this researcher be removed and that proper protocols be restored. Or, Commander Hyon said calmly, we could test it properly. A controlled demonstration that would prove one approach or the other. The professor went very still. What sort of demonstration? A simple one. We place Cora in a secure testing environment. First, you demonstrate your control using your methods. Then Jiwoo demonstrates her approach. We observe the Terror-Hound's responses and compare them. Let the evidence speak for itself. It was a trap and Professor Tae-min knew it. But he had backed himself into a corner. If he refused, it would look like he wasn't confident in his own methods. If he agreed and his methods looked worse compared to Jiwoo's, his reputation would suffer. The other council members were nodding. This seemed like a reasonable solution. I accept, the professor said stiffly. But I insist on one condition. For a true test of these so-called bonding methods, the human must enter the testing area with Cora. No barriers, no restraints on the Terror-Hound. If she truly believes the creature is safe, she should be willing to prove it with her life. The conference hall went silent. Everyone understood what Professor Tae-min was doing. He was calling Jiwoo's bluff, no matter how much progress she thought she had made. Entering an enclosed space with an unrestrained Terror-Hound was incredibly dangerous. Even a creature that seemed friendly could have unpredictable instincts. Commander Hyun looked concerned. That seems excessive. We can demonstrate behavioral differences without requiring such risk. No, Jiwoo's voice rang out clearly. She had been sitting quietly in the observer section, but now she stood. I accept the professor's condition. I'll do it. Jiwoo, you don't have to, the commander began. Yes, I do. If I'm going to claim that Terror-Hounds are being misunderstood, I need to prove it conclusively. I need to show that Cora won't hurt me. Not because she's restrained, but because she chooses not to. Professor Taemin's expression was unreadable. He had expected the human to back down. Her acceptance put them both on uncertain ground. Very well, he said. We will conduct this demonstration. But be clear about what you are risking, human. If you are wrong, if your theories about Terror-Hound nature are incorrect, you will not survive the encounter. Cora will kill you, and there will not be time for intervention. I understand, Jiwoo said quietly, but inside her heart was racing. She believed her theories were correct. She believed Cora wouldn't hurt her. But belief and certainty were different things. She was about to bet her life on the connection she had built with a creature the entire galaxy considered a monster. The demonstration was scheduled for 3 days later. That would give time for proper preparation and for word to spread. This was becoming more than just a dispute between two researchers. It was becoming a test case for human methods, human thinking, human approaches to the unknown. During those 3 days, Jiwoo continued visiting Cora. She didn't mention what was coming. She just sat with the Terror-Hound talking softly, offering comfort. Cora seemed more relaxed each day. The muzzle had been removed at Jiwoo's request. Without it, Cora could express herself more naturally. She would make soft chuffing sounds, almost like laughter, when Jiwoo told her stories. On the night before the demonstration, Jiwoo couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Terror-Hounds were powerful. Even if Cora didn't mean to hurt her, an accident could be fatal. But then she thought about Cora, trapped in that tiny cage, living in constant fear and pain. She thought about all the other Terror-Hounds out. Part 5, the demonstration hall was packed. Word had spread throughout Velcor Station and beyond. Representatives from a dozen species had arrived to witness what was being called either a revolutionary moment in xenobiology or a tragic example of human overconfidence, depending on who you asked. The testing arena was a large circular space with reinforced transparent walls. It was designed for studying dangerous creatures in a controlled environment. The floor was covered in a material that provided good traction. There were no obstacles, no hiding places, nothing but open space. Observation platforms surrounded the arena on all sides, rising in tiers so everyone could see clearly. Medical teams stood ready with emergency equipment. Security personnel had weapons trained on the arena, prepared to intervene if necessary, though everyone knew that if Cora decided to attack, it would be over too quickly for anyone to help. Jiwoo stood in the preparation area, wearing her standard station uniform. No armor, no weapons, no protection of any kind. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered in her chest. Commander Hyun stood beside her, looking worried. "You can still back out," the commander said quietly. "Nobody would blame you. This is an unreasonable test. If I back out, nothing changes," Jiwoo replied. "Cora stays in her cage. Terror-Hounds continue being misunderstood. and humans continue being seen as too emotional for serious science. Better that than you being dead. I won't die. I trust her. In another preparation area on the opposite side of the arena, Professor Tayman waited with Cora. The Terror-Hound was fully restrained again, muzzle, collar, chains. The professor had insisted on this for transport. He would remove the restraints once inside the arena, but not before. Cora's 6 eyes darted around nervously. She could sense the tension in the air, the fear and anticipation radiating from hundreds of watching beings. Her body was tense, ready to fight or flee. The administrator overseeing the demonstration, a neutral party from the Torvan species, activated the communication system. His voice echoed through the hall. We are here to observe a controlled test of behavioral training methods for Category 5 dangerous creatures, specifically the Vrexian Terror-Hound known as Cora. The test will proceed in 2 phases. First, Professor Tayman will demonstrate his control methods. Second, researcher Jiwoo will demonstrate her bonding methods. All observers are reminded that this is a scientific demonstration, not entertainment. Please maintain silence and objectivity. The arena doors on Professor Tayman's side opened. He led Cora in, the chains clinking with each step. The Terror-Hound moved reluctantly, her claws scraping against the floor. When they reached the center of the arena, the professor stopped. I will now demonstrate proper apex predator control, he announced, his voice amplified for all to hear. He pressed buttons on his remote control. The chains released and retracted. The muzzle unlocked and fell away. Finally, the neural collar powered down. For a moment, Cora just stood there, free for the first time in years. Then she shook herself, a full-body movement that rippled through her scales. She looked around the arena, taking in the walls, the watching crowds, the space she now occupied. Professor Tayman held up his remote control. Cora, sit. Cora turned her 6 eyes toward him. She didn't sit. She just stared. Sit, the professor repeated, his voice harder. His thumb moved toward the shock button. Cora's lips pulled back, revealing rows of serrated teeth. A low growl started in her chest. The sound made several observers in the front rows back away from the transparent walls. The professor pressed the button. Cora's body jerked as electricity coursed through her nervous system. She yelped in pain and dropped into a sitting position, her body trembling. You see, Professor Tayman addressed the crowd. Firm control. Clear commands. Immediate consequences. This is how one manages dangerous creatures. They must understand that resistance brings pain. Obedience brings relief. But Cora wasn't looking at the professor anymore. Her 6 eyes had found Jiwoo, standing in the preparation area on the other side of the arena, the Terror-Hound's whole body oriented toward the human, ignoring the Calvex completely. Professor Tayman noticed. Cora, look at me. Face me. Cora didn't move. Her attention remained fixed on Jiwoo. The professor pressed the shock button again. Cora flinched but still didn't turn away from the human. The growl in her chest grew louder, but it wasn't directed at Jiwoo. It was directed at the source of her pain. This is the limitation of fear-based methods. Dr. Rena's voice came over the speakers from the observation platform. The subject associates the trainer with pain. Compliance comes only from threat of punishment. Remove the punishment and you remove the compliance. Professor Tayman's crystalline skin flushed darker. He pressed the button a 3rd time, holding it longer. Cora's roar of pain echoed through the hall. Several observers gasped. But when the shock ended, the Terror-Hound didn't obey. Instead, she turned fully toward Professor Tayman, her body lowered in a stance that any predator-prey researcher recognized as preparation for attack. Enough! Commander Hyan's voice came firmly over the speakers. Professor, exit the arena. You've demonstrated your point. The professor hesitated, clearly wanting to continue to prove his dominance. But Cora took a step toward him, and survival instinct overrode pride. He backed toward the exit door, keeping the remote control pointed at Cora. When he reached the door, it sealed behind him with a solid thunk. Cora was alone in the arena, breathing hard, her body still tense from the shocks. She shook herself again, trying to shake off the pain and fear. Then she looked around the space, processing that she was no longer restrained, no longer confined to her tiny cage. The arena was huge compared to what she was used to. She could move. She could run. For the first time in years, she had space. The Terror-Hound began to pace, testing the boundaries of the arena. Her movements were fluid and powerful. This was an apex predator in her element, and every observer was reminded of just how dangerous she could be. This creature could tear apart most beings in this room with minimal effort. Researcher Jiwoo. The administrator's voice came over the speakers. You may enter the arena when ready. Jiwoo took a deep breath. This was it. She stepped forward, and the door to her side of the arena slid open. The sound made Korra spin around. Her 6 eyes locked onto Jiwoo. The Terror-Hound went very still, a statue of obsidian scales and predatory focus. Jiwoo walked into the arena slowly, her movements calm and confident. She kept her body language open and non-threatening. She didn't make direct eye contact, which could be seen as challenging. She just walked to the center of the arena and stopped, standing in the same spot where Professor Taemin had been moments before. The door sealed behind her. She was locked in with a Terror-Hound. No barriers. No weapons. No way out if things went wrong. Hey, Korra, Jiwoo said softly, speaking in Korean. Her voice was barely audible to the observers, but Korra's ears swiveled toward her, catching every sound. It's just you and me now, girl. Just like always. I know you're scared. I know all these people watching make you nervous. But I'm here, and I'm not going to hurt you. Korra tilted her massive head. The tension in her body began to ease slightly. She took a step toward Jiwoo, then stopped as if unsure. It's okay. Jiwoo continued, still speaking in that soft, gentle tone. You can come closer. I'm not afraid of you. I never have been, and it was true. Standing in that arena, alone with a creature that could kill her in seconds, Jiwoo felt no fear. She felt only affection for this misunderstood creature who had suffered so much. She felt hope that things could be different. Korra sensed it. Her telepathic sensitivity read Jiwoo's emotional state clearly. No fear, no aggression, no desire to dominate or control, just genuine caring affection. The Terror-Hound moved closer, not stalking, not hunting, but approaching like a creature seeking connection. She circled Jiwoo once, scenting her, confirming what her telepathic sense told her. Then she stopped directly in front of the human, so close that Jiwoo could feel the heat radiating from her scaled body. They stood like that for a long moment, human and Terror-Hound, eye to eyes. The observation hall was completely silent. Hundreds of beings held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Then Korra lowered her massive head and gently, carefully, nudged Jiwoo's hand with her nose. Jiwoo smiled. She lifted her hand and scratched behind Korra's ears, just as she had done through the cage. Her fingers found the spots that Korra loved, and the Terror-Hound's 6 eyes slowly closed. The deep rumbling purr started up, so loud that observers could feel it through the arena floor. But Korra didn't stop there. In a movement that shocked everyone watching, the Terror-Hound rolled onto her back, exposing her belly to Jiwoo. It was the ultimate gesture of trust, of submission, of pack bonding. In the wild, Terror-Hounds only did this with pack members they trusted completely. Jiwoo knelt beside her and ran her hands along Korra's scaled belly, speaking softly in Korean. To the observers, the words were incomprehensible, but the tone carried everything they needed to understand. This was affection. This was friendship. This was a bond that had nothing to do with dominance or fear. In the observation area, Professor Taemin stood frozen, his crystalline face unreadable. His entire understanding of xenobiology, built over decades of study and practice, had just been